Hebrew is the first language of the Bible, and most of the Old Testament was written in it. Aramaic is the second language, and it is derived from Hebrew. Whereas Hebrew was the official liturgical language for temple and synagogue worship, as well as for writing and proclaiming the sacred texts, Aramaic is what common folks spoke. Greek is the third language of the Bible. It was the common language at the time for spreading the gospel, because even the Latin-speaking Roman Empire used Greek for commerce and diplomacy. No book of the Bible was originally written in Latin. By the end of the 4th century AD, in 394, Pope Damasus commissioned St. Jerome to translate the extant Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek texts into one common language of Latin, in one complete Bible volume. This translation was completed 6 years later and is called the Latin Vulgate. Venerable Bede, an English priest and scholar, wrote an Anglo-Saxon versions of the Bible which first appeared as far back as the 8th century AD. An English version appeared in AD 1384, commissioned by John Wycliffe, an English Catholic theologian, but the Catholic Church did not approve it, since his teaching had been condemned as heretical. The 16th century saw many Protestant Bible translations. In 1525, William Tyndale came up with his translation, which followed by the Coverdale Bible in 1535. In 1541, the Great Bible was in print, followed by the Geneva Bible in 1560, and finally with the Bishop's Bible in 1568. The Douay-Rheims Bible was the first Catholic Bible translated in English since the Reformation and predated the King James Version by 2 years. Original autograph of the Bible is considered inspired. The copies are not. Human beings can make mistakes when copying manuscripts, and yet the substance can still remain intact. List here some types of copying errors. Ditography, copier writes something twice instead of one, thus latter instead of later. Fission, improperly dividing the word, thus nowhere becomes now here. Fusion, combining the latter letter of the word to the first letter of the next, thus therein becomes therein. Apocryphy, writing once what should have been writing twice, thus later instead of latter. Homophony, confusing a word with the same pronunciation but different meaning, thus there instead of there. Metathesis, mixing up the order of letters in a word, that cats instead of cats. Often, whenever anyone translates any document from the native language of the author to another language, choices will have to be made and some meaning may be inadvertently changed or modified. Someone seeking an idiomatic translation, for example, does not care about the word-for-word equivalence of the original language into the translated one. Formal correspondence translation is an attempt to make a literal translation with a word-for-word correspondence when possible. It also seeks to retain the same word order from the original into the translated language. Examples of this style of translation are King James, New King James, Douay-Rheims, Revised Standard Version, New Revised Standard Version, New American Bible, and the New International Version versions. This style of translation does not focus on using exact same word-for-word equivalents, but seeks to provide a faithful equivalent more comprehensible to the readers. Examples are New English Bible, Revised English Bible, Jerusalem Bible, New Jerusalem Bible. Historical development, theological background, and other elements shape versions of the Bible in print. Protestant versions such as the King James Version, the Revised Standard Version, and the New International Version basically omit the 7 deuterocanonical books in the Old Testament or retain them as apocrypha. The King James Version is the most popular and well-known English version of the Bible. In 1607, 50 scholars worked at Oxford and Cambridge to produce this famous edition. In 1611, King James I commissioned it as the official version in the English language. In 1937, the National Council of Churches invited 40 denominations to revise the King James Version based on contemporary scholarship, which had discovered several Greek manuscripts of Bible books older than anything previously available. Finished in 1946, the Revised Standard Version gave a good competition to the King James Version. In 1989, the new Revised Standard Version appeared. Catholic versions such as Douay Rheims, Knox, New American, Jerusalem, and Revised Standard Version Catholic Edition all had the 7 deuterocanonical books ordered in the same location as in the Septuagint Greek version. The version was translated for Catholics in exile from Elizabethan England and was completed before the King James Version. The New Testament was finished in Rheims and the Old Testament in Douay. It relied heavily on the Latin Vulgate of Jerome rather than the translation from the Greek. The Catholic Bishops of America commissioned the revision of the 1941 Confraternity of Christian Doctrine version of the Bible, and in 1970, 5 years after the closing of Vatican II, the New American Bible was published. This version used the Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek in contrast to the Douay Rheims, which relied heavily on the Latin Vulgate as sources in the translation. This is the version which is approved to be used in the Catholic Mass. Please go to YouTube Retimentality channel for the complete series of these introductory materials for Bible studies.